Maya Collins watched the wine glass sit there for 3 seconds too long, and in those 3 seconds she knew someone at table 7 was in trouble. The crystal caught the dim restaurant light as it rested near the edge of the white tablecloth. Every other glass had been placed by her or another server. This one appeared while she turned to grab fresh napkins. Someone who wasn't staff had put it there. Someone who knew exactly where Victor Leone would sit. Someone who wanted him gone. She kept her face blank as she approached the table with the wine bottle. Years of training had taught her that survival meant watching everything while appearing to notice nothing. The upscale restaurant buzzed with quiet conversation and clinking silverware. Soft piano music drifted from hidden speakers. Most people saw elegance. Maya saw hunting grounds. Victor Leone sat at the center of the table like a king holding court. His black suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months. Dark hair swept back from a face that magazines would call handsome if they didn't know what those hands had done. He laughed at something one of his men said, the sound rich and unguarded. He felt safe here. He came every month, always the same table, always surrounded by the same faces. That comfort would get him ended tonight if she didn't act fast. Maya had been working at Luminaire for 8 months. She'd chosen the job specifically because it was busy enough to stay anonymous but upscale enough that customers ignored the staff. She poured wine, cleared plates, and collected tips. Nobody asked questions. Nobody looked too close. That was exactly what she needed after walking away from her old life. But old instincts don't die. They just wait. She'd spotted the first red flag when Victor's usual bodyguard called in sick that morning. The replacement looked competent enough, but he positioned himself wrong, leaving gaps in the sight lines. Then there was the way one of Victor's inner circle, Marcus, kept checking his watch. Not casual glances. Precise timing checks. And now this glass, placed with surgical precision where Victor's right hand would naturally reach. The pieces formed a picture she'd seen before in classified briefings and surveillance photos. This wasn't random violence. This was a calculated hit dressed up as an evening out. Maya moved between tables with practiced grace, the wine bottle balanced in one hand. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her face showed nothing. She'd learned that skill in another life when staying calm meant staying alive. When she'd worked for people who made Victor Leone look like a Sunday school teacher. She approached table 7 with a pleasant smile that didn't reach her eyes. Victor's men barely glanced at her. To them she was furniture. Invisible. Forgettable. They had no idea she'd once coordinated security logistics for operations in 3 countries. They couldn't know she'd quit after watching an asset get torn apart because someone missed a detail just like the one she was seeing now. Gentlemen, shall I top off anyone's glass? Her voice came out smooth and professional. Victor turned to her, and for a fraction of a second their eyes met. His were dark brown, sharp with intelligence that most people underestimated. He looked at her the way most powerful men looked at servers, with polite disinterest. Then he glanced at his nearly empty glass. The poison one. Please, he said, already turning back to his conversation about shipping routes and container logistics. Maya's mind raced through options. If she warned him outright, whoever planted the poison would know their cover was blown. They might have a backup plan. They might panic and start shooting. Innocent people would die. But if she did nothing, Victor would drink, and based on the slight discoloration she'd noticed in the wine, he'd be dead before the ambulance arrived. She'd promised herself no more bloodshed. No more operations. No more playing God with other people's lives. But watching someone die when she could prevent it? That was a line she wouldn't cross. Maya reached for Victor's glass with her left hand while her right hand tilted the wine bottle toward the glass beside it. In one smooth motion she switched their positions, murmuring, "Apologies, sir. Condensation on the base." She quickly wiped where the poisoned glass had been with her bar towel, then filled the new glass in Victor's spot. The whole exchange took 4 seconds. Nobody reacted. The conversation continued. Victor's hand moved toward his wine without looking. He was mid-sentence about a warehouse in Newark when he lifted the glass and drank. Maya stepped back, her pulse thundering in her ears. She'd just contaminated a crime scene. Destroyed evidence. Put her fingerprints all over a murder weapon. But Victor was still talking, still breathing, still alive. She turned to refill Marcus's glass, the one that had been in Victor's spot. The one that should have ended someone's life tonight. Marcus was the type who drank everything put in front of him. She'd watched him plow through 3 cocktails already. "Thank you, sweetheart," Marcus said without looking at her. He grabbed the glass immediately and took a long drink. Maya moved to the next person at the table, her hands steady even as her mind screamed warnings. She needed to get away from this table. Needed to be anywhere else when it happened. But her feet felt welded to the floor. Marcus coughed. The sound cut through the dinner conversation like a blade. Wet and harsh. He coughed again, harder this time. His face went from red to purple in the span of a heartbeat. The glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the marble floor. Wine spread like blood across the white tiles. Then Marcus collapsed. His chair toppled backward as his body hit the ground. Foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. His hands clawed at his throat, but there was nothing to grab, nothing to fight. The poison was already in his bloodstream, already shutting down every system that kept him alive. Chaos erupted like a bomb going off. Victor's men jumped to their feet, hands diving inside jackets for weapons that security regulations said they couldn't carry, but everyone knew they did. Someone screamed. A woman at a nearby table knocked over her water glass. The peaceful restaurant transformed into a war zone in seconds. "Lock it down." Victor's voice cut through the panic like a whip crack. "Nobody leaves. Nobody moves." His bodyguards moved with military precision, positioning themselves at every exit. The replacement guard pulled out a radio and started barking orders. Within 30 seconds, every door was covered. Every window watched. Everyone inside Luminaire was now a suspect or a witness. Victor knelt beside Marcus's body. His face had gone cold and blank. All traces of the laughing dinner guest vanished. This was the man who'd built an empire on calculated violence. The man who'd survived 3 previous assassination attempts. The man who'd just watched someone die in his place. Maya stood frozen 5 feet away, the wine bottle still in her hand. Her training screamed at her to run, to disappear before Victor's people started asking questions. But running would mark her as guilty. Running would get her caught. Victor's head turned slowly until his eyes found hers. The look sent ice down her spine. He wasn't seeing a waitress anymore. He was seeing the last person who'd touched that table. The last person near Marcus before he died. And he was replaying every movement, every gesture, every second of the last 5 minutes. His eyes dropped to the shattered glass on the floor. Then to the glasses still on the table. Then back to Maya's face. She watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. His jaw tightened. His eyes widened just a fraction. He looked at where he was sitting, then at where Marcus had been, then at the 2 wine glasses that should have been reversed. The restaurant had gone silent except for sirens growing louder outside. Red and blue lights began painting the walls through the front windows. Police and ambulances responding to the emergency call. Victor stood slowly, his movements controlled and deliberate. He walked toward Maya with the calm of a predator who'd already won. His men shifted, ready to grab her if she bolted. But Maya didn't run. She met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. Just a tiny dip of her chin that said, "Yes, you're right, you understand what happened." Victor stopped 3 feet away. Close enough that she could see gold flecks in his brown eyes. Close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with wine and fierce sweat. "You," he said quietly. Just that one word. "The glass was wrong," Maya whispered back. "Someone put it there while I wasn't looking. You would have reached for it by instinct. Why didn't you say something?" "Because whoever did this needed to think it worked. If I'd caused a scene, if I'd warned you out loud, they would have known their plan failed. They might have had backup. People could have started shooting." She glanced around at the crowded restaurant. Innocent people. Victor studied her face like he was reading a book written in a language only he understood. "Who are you?" "Nobody," Maya said. "Just a waitress." Nobody isn't trained to spot poison. Nobody doesn't recognize an assassination setup. Before Maya could answer, the police burst through the front doors. Detectives and uniformed officers flooded the space, shouting commands and securing the scene. Someone grabbed Maya's arm and pulled her away from Victor. Questions came rapid fire from all directions. Names and addresses and what did you see and when did you notice and 1,000 other demands for information. Maya gave them the basics. Her name. Her job. The fact that she'd been serving table 7 when Marcus collapsed. She said nothing about the glass switch. Nothing about the poison. Nothing that would make her anything more than a witness who got unlucky. But across the restaurant, past the barriers of police and bodyguards, Victor's eyes never left her face. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of police stations and interview rooms. Maya repeated her story until it felt like a script. Yes, she'd been working all night. No, she hadn't noticed anything unusual. Yes, she'd served table 7. No, she didn't know any of the men personally. The detective seemed satisfied. She was just another restaurant worker caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They let her go at 4 in the morning with instructions not to leave town. Maya walked out into the pre-dawn darkness and found Victor Leone leaning against a black car across the street. He ditched the jacket and tie. His white shirt had spots of wine on it from kneeling beside Marcus. He looked tired in a way that expensive suits usually hid. Human in a way that reputation usually buried. "Get in," he said. Not a request. Maya's instincts screamed danger. Every survival skill she'd ever learned said walk away, disappear, never look back. But she'd already made her choice when she switched that glass. Already pulled herself out of the shadows and into his world. She crossed the street and got in the car. They drove in silence through empty streets. The city looked different at this hour, stripped of its daytime mask. Raw and honest and a little bit dangerous. Like the man sitting beside her. Victor finally spoke when they'd put several miles between them and the police station. "Marcus had been with me for 12 years. I trusted him with everything. My business. My family. My life. He was the one timing the hit," Maya said quietly. "He kept checking his watch. Making sure everything stayed on schedule." Victor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I know. I had my people check his phone records while you were being questioned. He'd been in contact with the Kozlov family for 3 months. They paid him $500,000 to make sure I drank from that glass. He didn't know I'd switched them. Nobody did." Victor glanced at her. "You still haven't told me who you are." Maya watched streetlights slide past the window. "I used to work in private security logistics. High-level stuff. Corporate protection, asset management, threat assessment. I was good at it. Really good. Then a job went wrong. Someone I was supposed to protect died because another operative missed a detail. One small thing that seemed like nothing until it was everything. So you quit." "I walked away from that whole world. Found a quiet job where nobody asks questions. Where I could just be invisible and normal and far away from people dying. Didn't work out so well tonight." Maya almost smiled. "No. I guess old habits don't really die. They just wait for the right moment to remind you who you used to be." The car pulled up outside a building that looked like it cost more than her entire neighborhood. Victor killed the engine but didn't move to get out. "The Kozlovs won't stop," he said. "Marcus was just their first attempt. They'll send others. Better ones. More careful ones. That's your world, not mine. You made it your world when you saved my life." Victor turned to face her fully. "I want to offer you money. Protection. A position in my organization. Whatever you need." Maya shook her head before he finished. "I don't want any of that." "Then what do you want?" She looked at him directly and for the first time that night she let him see past the waitress mask. Let him see the operator who'd coordinated missions across continents. The woman who'd once been very, very good at the same kind of work his people did. "Never let arrogance blind you again," she said. "You got comfortable. Predictable. You came to the same restaurant at the same time with the same people. You let yourself believe that power made you untouchable. That's what almost got you ended tonight. Not the Kozlovs. Not Marcus. Your own certainty that nobody would dare." The words hung between them like a challenge. Most people didn't talk to Victor Leone this way. Most people who did ended up in rivers. But Victor just nodded slowly. "You're right. I know I'm right. That's why I could spot what was happening. Because I've seen it before. I've watched powerful people die because they forgot that death doesn't care about reputation or money or how many men you have standing guard. And you think I'll remember that? I think you'll remember Marcus drinking from your glass. I think you'll remember how close you came. And I think that memory will keep you sharper than any amount of money could buy. Maya reached for the door handle. I have to get some sleep before my shift tomorrow. Still have bills to pay. You're going back to the restaurant? Where else would I go? Victor studied her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people are. Most people didn't just save your life. Maya opened the door and stepped out into the cool morning air. She leaned down to look at him one more time. Besides, fear is what gets people in trouble. Fear makes you paranoid or reckless or both. I'm neither. She closed the door and walked away without looking back. She felt his eyes on her until she turned the corner. The next 3 weeks passed in strange normalcy. Maya worked her shifts at Luminaire. The restaurant reopened after a thorough investigation. New security measures went into place. Stricter rules about who could access the dining room. Background checks for all staff. But life moved forward the way it always did, absorbing tragedy and carrying on. She heard things. Whispers in the kitchen. News reports. The Kozlov family's operation crumbled from the inside out. Key members disappeared. Businesses shuttered. Money dried up. Victor Leone was making it very clear what happened to people who moved against him. But he never came back to the restaurant. Until he did. Maya was refilling sugar containers near the front when the door opened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The lunch rush had ended. Only a handful of tables were occupied. She glanced up automatically and froze. Victor walked in alone. No bodyguards. No entourage. No men in expensive suits creating a buffer between him and the world. Just Victor Leone in dark jeans and a simple gray sweater, looking more human than Mafia boss. He spotted her and headed straight for her station. Maya set down the sugar container carefully. Her hands stayed steady even though her heart rate picked up. She hadn't expected to see him again. Had convinced herself their night together was a closed chapter. Table for one? She asked, falling into the professional server voice like armor. If you're working it, Victor said. She led him to a quiet corner table away from windows and other diners. Old habits. He noticed and smiled slightly. The kind of smile that said he understood she was still protecting him even though she claimed to want nothing to do with his world. Coffee, he said when she handed him a menu. Black. Maya returned a moment later with a steaming cup. She set it down and started to turn away, but Victor's hand caught her wrist. Not rough. Not threatening. Just enough contact to make her stop. Sit with me, he said quietly. Please. She shouldn't. Management frowned on servers socializing with customers. But the restaurant was nearly empty, and something in Victor's expression made her pull out the chair across from him. They sat in silence for a moment. Victor sipped his coffee. Maya folded her hands on the table and waited. She'd learned patience in her old job. Sometimes the most important information came after the quiet. The Kozlovs are finished, Victor finally said. What was left of their organization is either scattered or absorbed. Marcus's family has been taken care of. His daughter's college is paid for. His wife has a pension. They didn't deserve to suffer for his choices. Maya nodded but said nothing. I've been thinking about what you said. About arrogance. About getting comfortable. Victor turned his coffee cup slowly on its saucer. You were right. I'd fallen into patterns. Trusted people I shouldn't have. Believed that my reputation would keep me safe. And now I'm more careful. I change my routines. I watch for the details that don't fit. I remember that death doesn't care who I am or what I've built. He looked up at her. I remember that sometimes the person who saves your life is the one you never saw coming. Maya felt something shift in her chest. A wall she'd built carefully over 8 months developing tiny cracks. Why did you come back here? Because I wanted to see if you were real. If that night actually happened the way I remembered it. Or if I'd built you up in my head into something you weren't. And you're exactly who I thought you were. Someone who walked away from a world most people would do anything to enter. Someone who values anonymity over power. Someone who saved a stranger's life and asked for nothing in return except a promise to be smarter. Victor reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He set it on the table between them. Just his name and a phone number. Nothing else. I'm not asking you to work for me. I'm not asking you to be part of my organization. I'm just asking if I can come have coffee sometimes. Talk to someone who isn't afraid of me and isn't trying to get something from me. Someone who sees me as the man who almost died instead of the man who runs half the city. Maya looked at the card. At him. At the afternoon sunlight coming through the window and painting gold across the white tablecloth. This was a choice point. She could take the card and let him into her life in some small way. Or she could refuse and maintain the walls that kept her safe and separate and alone. She thought about Marcus dying on the restaurant floor. About Victor's face when he realized what she'd done. About the fact that they'd both lived that night because of 3 seconds and one switched glass. Maya picked up the card and slipped it into her apron pocket. Coffee, she said. Just coffee. Nothing else. Victor's smile was small but genuine. Just coffee. She stood and picked up her sugar containers. Work was calling and she'd never been someone who left tasks unfinished. But before she walked away she looked back at him one more time. Victor. Yeah. Try the apple pie before you go. It's actually worth the $7 price tag. He laughed. The sound was warm and unguarded and nothing like the man she'd seen holding court 3 weeks ago. I'll do that. Maya went back to work, refilling sugars and checking on other tables and being exactly who she'd been for 8 months. Just a waitress in an upscale restaurant. Nobody special. Nobody dangerous. But in her pocket, a business card sat like a promise or maybe a threat. And at table 12, a Mafia boss ate apple pie alone and looked more at peace than he had in years. Outside the city moved on. Deals were made. Crimes were committed. People lived and died in the endless dance of power and survival. But inside Luminaire for just a moment, 2 people who'd touched death and walked away sat in the same room and remembered that sometimes the smallest actions by the most invisible people decide who sees tomorrow. Maya Collins went home that night and put the card on her refrigerator. She told herself it meant nothing. That she'd probably never call. That this was just a strange chapter in her life that would fade like the others. But 3 days later, when her phone rang from an unknown number and Victor's voice asked if she wanted to grab actual coffee at a place that didn't cost $7 for pie, she said yes. Because maybe, just maybe, walking away from violence didn't mean walking away from connection. Maybe saving someone's life created a bond that couldn't be explained or categorized or fit into neat boxes. And maybe after 8 months of being invisible, Maya Collins was ready to be seen again. Not as an operative. Not as a weapon. Just as a woman who'd switched a glass and changed everything. Listen, I want you to know this, in a world where everyone's chasing power and money, remember this. Death doesn't care about any of that. What saves you isn't always the bodyguard with the gun or the $1 million security system. Sometimes it's the person you never even looked at. The one you thought didn't matter. The waitress. The janitor. The stranger who noticed what everyone else missed. So pay attention to the quiet ones. And if you're the quiet one, never underestimate the power you have to change everything with one small action. Your moment might be closer than you think. If you like this story, subscribe because we've got more stories coming up that you'll love. Thank you.